So have you ever had one of those ideas that you think this is going to be awesome, let's do it, and then halfway through committing to it, you realize that it's a whole lot more work than you expected? That's what we got going on today. Hey, welcome back. I'm Lucas, and this is the Two Car Garage, and wait till you see what we have in store for you today. So last week we had kind of gone through all of the things we've been working on, and I showed you some of the new stuff that we've picked up, audio equipment, and we got the interior in the car, and we're progressing through now to actually get going on the interior. At that time, I had alluded to something I was doing with the speedometer, and well, I've been working on it here. Actually, I've been working on it all week, and well, just wait until you see what we have in store here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this camera set up so you can see the table, and I'll kind of show you what's going on. And I think you might like what you see. So let's move over. Okay, here's what we got. On the table here in front of me, I have all of the gauges that we're actually going to be using in this car. And we're not going crazy with the gauges. We're not going to have an oil pressure gauge or a temperature gauge. We're not even going to have a voltmeter. For those items, we're just going to be using the original indicator lights that are standard on a Volkswagen. But what we do have here is the speedometers. I've got a couple of them here, and you'll see why in a minute. I've got the fuel gauge in front of me, as well as the gauges for the suspension, the air ride suspension. And they're just there to kind of tell you how much pressure you have on each shock to get the car leveled out. And really, after kind of getting everything gathered up and really kind of figuring out what we wanted to do here, I had mentioned last week that I have the original speedometer here, and it doesn't work quite right. There's something going on, and I haven't pulled it apart yet to see, but I just know that there's an issue there, so it needs to be dealt with. I also showed that I had this 100 mile an hour speedometer. This is out of a late model, I should say a later model, like a Super Beetle. Again, it goes up to 100, has a whole bunch of places for indicator lights, and it's just a completely different gauge than the older style. But when I was talking to Curt, I asked him if he wanted me to use something like this, and he really was like, nah, he doesn't like this style gauge, and I don't blame him. It's the modern numbers and just the general design of it is kind of weird looking. So we originally opted to just forget about this. However, as I've been kind of going through other things, I've always had it in the back of my mind that I really wanted to use this gauge because it has all of these extra holes for indicator lights. And I came up with an idea. I floated it past Curt, and he agreed with what my idea is here. And well, now we're gonna go ahead and show you what's going on. So if you look at this one here, this is our original 1965 speedometer, and then we've got the face here of this later model one. And here's what we're gonna do. Printed up here, I actually have new faces for these gauges. This is something that I put together. It took me, well, I don't even want to tell you how much time it took me. But this is a vector image, and if I put this next to the 100 mile an hour speedometer, you can see that the hash marks all line up, and it's this face here is line for line the same as the original one. So it's going to be accurate in the reading sense. But if I get rid of this one and bring this one back, you'll see that I actually used these same style numbers that are on the older speedometer. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to preserve the flavor of the early style one, but we want to use the 100 mile an hour face. and we're going to be changing it to white. There's a couple of reasons we're doing that. One, I like white face gauges. I always have. On my personal cars, I try to convert to white face. My Dodge Super Bee has white face gauges. When I get time, my dune buggy is going to be converted to white face. And really, it just has a kind of a classic look to it. It's also different than, you know, just a typical gauge that you see. Another reason I opted to go with the white face is if I grab this guy here, this is the valves and one of the gauges for the air ride. You know, if you take a look at this, you'll see that it's a white-faced gauge. So it's got a white perimeter, and then there's a silver circle in the middle, and then it's actually a dual needle gauge, so you can control the two different shocks. It really kind of looks good, and I didn't want to try to track down another gauge and spend the extra money to get one that had a black dial, as well as I don't want to have to mess with this. I don't want to take this apart and change the face on that. So we opted to just convert the other gauges to a white dial. And again, this is what we came up with. Now, there's a couple of other advantages beyond just the color as to why I've selected the later model speedometer here. And really it comes down to these extra indicator holes. What I plan on doing here is on the original style Volkswagen, when you turn on your directionals, there's a little double arrow down here at the bottom. And in fact, if I just grab this face, it'll probably be a little easier to see. When you turn on the directionals with the old style gauge, it's just this single double arrow down here that blinks with either left or right directional. And I kind of thought it would be cool if we could have two indicator lights, one for left, one for right, like a typical modern car. And if you look at this one, there are two indicator lights on either side of the face. And my thinking is I can use those as my directional indicators. So we'll put some green lights behind there, and then when you turn on your left blinker is going to flash. When you turn on your right blinker is going to flash, and it should be more like a modern car. The double arrow down at the bottom, that one will be connected actually to our emergency flasher. So when I turn the emergency flasher on, it'll be that single one that's going to be blinking. And that'll tell you that your emergency flashers are on, or your hazards. So that's why I wanted to go with this gauge. You know, again, it's 100 miles an hour, which, I mean, this car's never going to go that fast. But then I've got these extra spots for indicators, so it's really kind of a slick setup for that. So now I've got this white face gauge that's going to be applied to this dial, and when it's done, it should be pretty slick. Now, this didn't just happen overnight here. There was actually a lot of work to get to this point. I have hours in front of the computer. Partly was me learning the program that I designed this on, but then also I've gone through a whole bunch of different versions of it until we settled on one that was gonna actually work for us. So after I got the speedometer figured out, I needed to do something with the fuel gauge, because the fuel gauge, if you look at the face of this, you know, again, it's a black gauge, you know, with the white letters. And now imagine you've got the two air ride gauges that are white, and then you've got a white speedometer, and then all of a sudden you've got this black fuel gauge, and it really just was going to look kind of funny. So I took some time and I made up let me grab it here. I made up a square label to match the rest of it. So if I put these side by side, you can see that again. It's a direct copy of the original gauge, just with the black lettering. And so now you're going to have white gauges across the board, and it should look pretty slick. After I got this made up, what I did is I actually put the gauges all back together. I've got a little cutout here that I just slid in. I put the gauges together and I mounted them in the dash. For the air ride gauges, I printed up a copy of what it is going to look like once it's in the grills, and I just put pictures of the stock of the gauges as they come, and I put everything together, and well, this is what it looked like. It doesn't look too terrible, but the issue is you've got two round gauges for the air pressure on one side. You've got a round speedometer, and then you've got a square fuel gauge, and it just kind of looked off. Now, after kind of stewing on that for a couple of minutes, I decided to do a favor for Curt here, and what I pulled out of my own personal store bin here. I actually have a round fuel gauge, and it's a mechanical fuel gauge like the original square one that this car has. This is just out of a Carmen Ghia, and this is actually destined to be the fuel gauge for my dune buggy. But I told Curt that he could have it for his project here, and so I went ahead then and just took this gauge face and I converted that into this label here. And again, you can see it's a direct copy. It's just basically it's a negative image. And now we can go ahead and slap that together. And now you're going to have all round gauges on the dash. And it should look pretty slick once everything's actually put together. I got all that laid out, put it together. Rough, this is all just, I'm printing paper and taping it to the dashboard. And then I sent it to Curt, and he's like, yeah, that looks good, except for the air ride gauges. If you take a look at these, again, this is a modern style gauge, and it just doesn't look right next to the old style gauges. And Curt said, can you reface these as well? I really didn't want to. Making the labels didn't take that long because I already kind of had it figured out. But I really didn't want to take these gauges apart. I've already kind of pushed my limits a little bit by taking the fuel gauge apart, taking the speedometer apart. I didn't want to be messing up this. This is these are like $50 or $80 gauges, and they also have plastic housing. So I was worried about maybe breaking something, or ended up trashing a perfectly good gauge, a brand new gauge, and having to buy a new one. But Curt said just go ahead and do it, give it a shot. So I did. So there's the face of the air gauge, and you can see that if we kind of look up close here, that it's a nice looking gauge. It just doesn't match. So what I did is I went ahead and just mimicked using all of the patterns I already made for the other gauges, and I made my own label. And let me grab it here and we'll take a peek at it. So there it is. There's the gauge in the pattern that I'm going to use to cut out so I can tape it in the car. And in fact, let me just show you the actual picture here so you can get an up close look at it. And you'll notice that the numbers are the same as for the speedometer. I literally just took the exact same numbers I used in the speedometer and I just shrunk them down. I went ahead and threw the lines in there to mimic that's on the speedometer as well as what's on the fuel gauge, and it kind of looks pretty cool. To be honest, I'm really glad we decided, that Curt decided that I should go ahead and just do it all. So now we're going to have 4 custom gauges. They will be the only gauges like this in any Volkswagen you're ever going to see. at least until somebody copies me. But I think it's really just going to kind of tie everything together. You know, we've got this old world styling with a lot of the modern touches, and it should be pretty slick. So now that you kind of see everything I had to go through to get to this point, you can, you know, hopefully you can kind of understand why I've been at this for a week now. But let me show you what it actually looks like in the car. I took a picture of it, and you can see here the you know, the gauges on the left for the air ride, and right below that you'll notice that there's actually a little mock-up of the switches, and that is where we're going to be putting the valves for the suspension. And it really kind of all works together. So you got the valves and you got the gauges right next to it. I put them on the left-hand side of the car, and really the reason for that is so if Curt's at like a car show or something like that, he's going to have the windows open, or at least the driver's window open, and he can actually just reach in from the outside, and he can raise and lower the car without having to open the door. And you know, is that necessary? No, but it's really just kind of makes the whole package a little bit nicer. Well, now that you see that we've got everything figured out, after I got through everything and kind of really was like, okay, I've got the plan figured out, I went ahead and, you know, started working on stuff and getting everything going. And right here in this bin, this is actually the bezel off of my Karmann Ghia fuel gauge. Well, I guess I should say it's Curt's now. And if you look at this up close, you'll notice that it's just kind of crappy looking. In a couple places here, it looks like the plating is starting to wear through. It's, you know, it's just plain old beat up. It's got a lot of pits in it, and I was really concerned that it just wasn't gonna polish up right. So I was now stuck with having a potentially ugly bezel, and one that was, you know, potentially the wrong shape as far as, you know, what it's going to look like. And so I thought, well, we've got to be able to improve that. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time or money, and I wasn't going to search for another fuel gauge, because chances are I wasn't going to get one that was, you know, as nice as I want it to be. And I didn't want to try getting something like this re-chromed. So here's what I came up with. I decided to just buy another gauge of some sort that had the same bezel as these air ride gauges. I kind of had a feeling I could do this and it would work, and well, I think it worked. Here's what I got. Now I just went on Amazon, and this gauge was $20, and this is just an Equus temperature gauge. It was actually the cheapest gauge I could find, but more importantly, if I pull this out, if you look at this, it actually has the same bezel as this air gauge. It's got the raised ring in the middle, and then it's got the step down to the larger diameter ring. The thickness is not exactly correct. It is a little bit on the thinner side than this. But you're going to have the air ride gauges on one side of the speedometer, and you're going to have the fuel gauge on the other side of the speedometer. So if their shapes are a little bit different, I don't think anybody's going to notice. Now, I know all of you are going to notice because I've told you about it, but the average person walking by is not going to see that. So now I've got this $20 temperature gauge, and it's going to sacrifice itself so I can have this bezel. You know, we're going to go ahead and peel this bezel off. We'll use that. We're also going to use the glass off of this because this lens is, you know, brand new and it's nice and shiny. The original lens off the fuel gauge is just, you know, 60 years old, so it's got a bunch of marks and scratches in it. So we've got a brand new lens, brand new bezel. I will polish this up and make sure it looks nicer. And then I'm going to have a fuel gauge that's going to be pretty slick. So now you can kind of see what my week has been like. It's been pretty intense, actually. You know, every time I get one thing figured out, I come up with 4 other problems that need to be solved. And it all has to happen now. I really want to have these gauges done, assembled, ready to go. Because when I start mocking everything up in the car, I want to put all the gauges in place so I can get things wired up and, really have this part done. And ultimately, when I get these all assembled, after we get the mock-up done, I can wrap them up real nicely, box them up, put them on a shelf, and then at least I have that much of it done. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to see this, and they're going to be like, holy crap, that's way too much work. And, you might be right. But if you look at everything that we're doing to this car, and we still have more work like this planned, I think it's really going to be what sets this car apart from any other car at a car show. Curt's going to get a one-of-a-kind set of gauges that nobody else in the world is going to have, and I get the satisfaction of doing something that nobody else has done, at least as far as the true customization. I've refaced gauges before, but I've always just bought pre-made labels and stuck them on. This is my first attempt at actually doing the whole process, and really it's really turning out to be pretty nice. I still have a lot of work to do. We got to figure out, like high beam indicator. We need to figure out a couple other small things, but I'm thinking that if I get all my parts in, I probably will have this stuff done by next week, and then we can kind of show you the finished project. But it's been frustrating. I'm not gonna lie, and there were times where I thought I was done, and then all of a sudden another hour's worth of work popped up. But I think it's really turning out to be something special. Speaking of something special, I just checked again before I started recording this video, and we are at 960 subscribers. At the rate that it's going, I kind of have a feeling that we're going to be at 1,000 subscribers probably by the end of the week here. And that means we're going to have a celebration. I mentioned it earlier that we're going to do a live stream, and talked to a couple different people about what we should do, and I think we've got a pretty good idea. I'm trying to get Curt to see if he'll come on. If we can't get him to come in, through video, at the very least he'll be there in the comments and kind of sharing his thoughts with us. But I got some plans. I got some announcements we'll be making at that time, and I think realistically, it should be a fun time. We're going to schedule it, starting with an hour and kind of see how things go. And, hopefully you're all able to come along and join us, at least for a little bit, kind of pop in and say hi. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do it in the evening, probably like an 8 or 9 o'clock stream on a Saturday. And that'll be in the Midwest of the United States. And I think that timing will kind of work out for those of you that are in different time zones. I know, we've got people in Australia are 15 hours apart from us. We've got people in Europe that are 6 hours ahead of us. So it could be kind of tough for those. It could be a late night. So, let me know what you think if you are, in a different time zone from, the central time zone of the United States. If you have a preference on the time, and I'm going to do my best to make it work for everybody, but we've got a whole globe to cover, and it could be kind of tough. So we'll just see how that happens. But it's going to happen, and I think it's going to be a pretty good time. And I'm actually working on shirts. I figured we'd celebrate by making up some shirts and making those available for purchase. And I hopefully will have that design finalized here in the next couple of days. And then once we do that live stream, we'll have an exclusive link for you that you can go on and get one if you are so inclined. I'm making it available. It's up to you where you want to go, but that's kind of what we're thinking. But that's it. That's what's going on. Again, long, kind of frustrating week here, getting this stuff figured out, and then you know, just all the other stuff that we've got planned, and you know, things are moving forward and really starting to look up. So I really got nothing else. So, you know, thanks again for hanging out here for another, you know, however long it's been, and I'm gonna let you go. So thanks for watching, and till the next one, I'll just see you around.